come in highs and lows. We get a lead, we get really excited, we're way up here, and then something says, okay, that's not the right lead, and we go back down. Now we get another lead, and it's what keeps us motivated. You got all these cops out there that want to find her.
In the high-stakes world of federal kidnappings, there is a golden hour protocol. The first 60 minutes where the FBI's sprawling resources are supposed to integrate seamlessly with local police. But in the 2026 abduction of Nancy Guthrie, that protocol didn't just fail, it was reportedly dismantled. While the public saw a united front of law enforcement, a civil war was brewing behind the yellow tape. The conflict centered on Sheriff Chris Nanos of the Pima County Sheriff's Department. As the lead local official, Nanos held the keys to the physical crime scene at Nancy's Tucson home. When the FBI's Evidence Response Team, ERT, arrived with their advanced 3D mapping lasers and trace DNA vacuum systems, they weren't greeted as partners. Instead, reports began to leak from within the department that the sheriff was gatekeeping the site. The most shocking allegation involves the original video feed. While the FBI has the nation's best digital forensic analysts, sources close to the investigation claim that the raw, uncompressed files from Nancy's security system were held exclusively by the sheriff's department for the first critical 48 hours. By the time the FBI gained full access to the blueprint of the home video, the trail was already getting cold. Why would a sheriff deny the FBI immediate, unfettered access? Some insiders suggest it was departmental pride, a desire to solve a celebrity-adjacent case without Big Brother taking the credit. Others point to something more clinical, a refusal to follow federal evidence handling procedures that might have preserved microscopic skin cells on the front porch. This friction didn't just create red tape, it created a vacuum. While the two agencies bickered over who owned the evidence, the kidnapper, the man in the black backpack, was using those hours to disappear into the vast, unmonitored expanse of the Arizona desert. By February 13, 2026, 12 days after Nancy Guthrie vanished, the tension between the Pima County Sheriff's Department and the FBI reached a public breaking point. A high-ranking law enforcement official, speaking on the condition of anonymity, leaked a devastating claim. Sheriff Chris Nanos was actively blocking the FBI from accessing physical evidence. The center of the controversy was a pair of gloves and DNA samples recovered from the Guthrie property. Standard procedure for a high-profile kidnapping involves sending evidence to the FBI's National Crime Laboratory in Quantico, Virginia, the most advanced forensic facility in the world. Instead, Nanos made a baffling decision. He bypassed the FBI entirely and sent the evidence to a private lab in Florida. The move was a logistical nightmare. The county reportedly spent over $200,000 to ship and process the evidence privately, while the FBI's billion-dollar resources sat idle. Critics argued that this was more than just a preference for a specific lab. It was a tactical detour designed to maintain local control. By keeping the physical evidence out of federal hands, the sheriff's department effectively blinded the FBI's forensic team. They couldn't perform their own independent sequences or cross-reference the raw DNA data with federal databases as quickly as they could have in-house. When confronted by the media, Sheriff Nanos dismissed the accusations of a rift as absolutely crazy. He argued that his department had a decades-long relationship with the Florida lab and that keeping all evidence in one place prevented it from being split up between agencies. The FBI was on board with this, Nanos insisted, but the damage to public perception was done. While the sheriff defended his loyalty to a private contractor, the Guthrie family was left waiting for results that were being delayed by bureaucratic stubbornness. The blueprint of the crime was in a test tube in Florida, while the search for Nancy in Arizona was losing its most powerful ally. By February 22, 2026, the optimism of the early investigation had been replaced by a grim reality. The forensic trail was stalling. While the FBI stood ready with the nation's most advanced sequencing technology, the private lab in Florida, hand-selected by Sheriff Chris Nanos, delivered a report that sent shockwaves through the task force. The DNA evidence, which many believed would provide the blueprint of the kidnapper, was compromised. In a candid and highly criticized interview with NBC News, Sheriff Nanos admitted that the lab was struggling to isolate what he termed mixed DNA samples. This meant that the genetic material recovered from the crime scene and the discarded glove was a jumble of multiple individuals, making it nearly impossible to pull a clean profile of the suspect. For the Guthrie family, it was a devastating setback. For the FBI, it was a told-you-so moment that leaked into the press through frustrated federal sources. The FBI's lab in Quantico deals with mixed samples and degraded DNA from war zones and cold cases every day, one law enforcement official told Reuters. By the time the sheriff realized the private lab was in over its head, weeks of potential identification time had been lost. The public's patience began to evaporate. Critics argued that Nanos' insistence on consistency by using the Florida lab was actually a bottleneck that favored departmental ego over Nancy's safety. As the $200,000 bill for private testing became public knowledge, local taxpayers and national observers alike began to ask why federal resources, offered for free, were being left on the sidelines. Nanos remained steadfast, urging the public to ignore the political commentary, but the damage was visible. The inside job theory was still active, but without a clear DNA profile to cross-reference against the family's inner circle, the investigation was flying blind. The mixed signals from the lab had become a metaphor for an investigation that seemed to be tripping over its own feet. By late February 2026, the halls of the Pima County Sheriff's Department were no longer united. While Sheriff Chris Nanos maintained a calm facade for the cameras, a high-ranking whistleblower from within his own ranks leaked a series of internal memos to local investigative journalists. The documents painted a picture of an investigation hampered by territorial vanity rather than logistical necessity. According to the leaked correspondence, the decision to send DNA evidence to the private Florida lab wasn't just a matter of consistency, as Nanos had claimed. The memos suggested it was a strategic move to prevent the FBI from taking primary custody of the case. In Arizona, the FBI cannot legally take over a kidnapping unless local law enforcement formally invites them or if the crime crosses state lines. By keeping the physical evidence, the blueprint of the suspect's identity, in a private lab under a county contract, Nanos ensured that his department remained the face of the investigation. The most damaging revelation in the memos concerned the timing of federal involvement. The whistleblower alleged that Nanos waited nearly 48 hours to officially request federal technical assistance, despite the FBI being on the ground, and offering help within hours of the initial 911 call. During those 2 lost days, the suspect had a massive head start, and the crime scene, which Nanos later admitted he relinquished to the family too early, was potentially contaminated by journalists and well-meaning relatives. As the news of the internal rift broke, Nanos was forced into a defensive crouch. He appeared on local affiliate KVOA to dismiss the reports as media-driven division, but the data told a different story. The county had already spent roughly $200,000 on the Florida lab, only to receive the mixed DNA report that led nowhere. Meanwhile, the FBI's $100,000 reward sat alongside the Guthrie family's $1 million plea, a stark reminder that while the agencies were fighting for control, the clock was running out for Nancy. The inside job was no longer just a theory about the kidnapper. The public was beginning to wonder if the investigation itself had been sabotaged from the inside. By late February 2026, the investigation into Nancy Guthrie's abduction had moved from the desert brush back to the front porch of her Tucson home. While the FBI's expert forensic teams were finally allowed onto the property, they discovered a reality that was as shocking as the crime itself. The crime scene had been released far too soon. Sheriff Chris Nanos made a stunning admission during an interview with News Nation's Ashley Banfield. He revealed that the Guthrie residence, the site where blood had been found on the steps and a doorbell camera had been ripped from its housing, had been turned back over to the family just 24 hours after the disappearance. To federal investigators, this was an unthinkable breach of protocol. In a high-stakes kidnapping, a crime scene is typically held for days, if not weeks, to ensure that every microscopic fiber and chemical signature is preserved. "We gave it back to them," Nanos stated, defending the move as a gesture of compassion for a grieving family. But the consequences were catastrophic. By the time the FBI's more advanced, Level A forensic units arrived, the house had already seen foot traffic from relatives, friends, and even cleaning crews. The blueprint of the kidnapper's path, the subtle scuffs on the floor or the specific way the intruder moved through the halls, had been potentially contaminated or scrubbed away. Even more controversial was the handling of the blood on the porch. While the sheriff's department eventually confirmed the blood belonged to Nancy, sources close to the FBI alleged that the initial collection of the samples was botched by local deputies who lacked the proper trace evidence training. The shocking secret wasn't a hidden piece of evidence, but the lack of it. Because the sheriff's department reportedly prioritized a local-first approach and denied the FBI immediate control of the perimeter, the physical evidence that could have linked a suspect to the house was compromised. As the investigation passed the one-month mark, the FBI was forced to admit that they were now chasing ghosts in a house that had been cleaned of its most vital secrets. By March 2, 2026, the public's focus shifted from the desert search to a mounting pile of county invoices. A bombshell report confirmed that the Pima County Sheriff's Department had spent approximately $200,000 to maintain its local control over the forensic evidence. This money wasn't spent on search teams or community outreach, but on shipping and processing DNA samples at a private laboratory in Florida. Services the FBI's National Crime Lab in Quantico had offered to perform for free. The shocking secret, whispered in the halls of the Pima County Board of Supervisors, was that this expenditure may have been entirely avoidable. As the search entered its fourth week, local officials began to question why taxpayer funds were being used to bypass federal expertise. The Blueberry Hill private lab in Florida was struggling with mixed DNA samples, a complex forensic puzzle that requires the kind of high-level sequencing only found at the federal level. By the time the sheriff's department admitted the snag at the lab, the trail for Nancy Guthrie had grown dangerously cold. The tension reached a fever pitch when it was revealed that Sheriff Chris Nanos had reportedly denied federal agents direct access to the raw forensic data for several weeks. In a world where minutes matter, the FBI was forced to wait for secondary reports from a private contractor rather than working with the original evidence. The Board of Supervisors, sensing a public relations disaster, began preparing a formal inquiry. They wanted to know if the blueprint of the investigation had been drafted to catch a kidnapper or to protect a political territory. As of early March, the bill of betrayal has become a rallying cry for critics of the investigation. With no suspect in custody and $200,000 in public funds already spent on a lab that provided more questions than answers, the question wasn't just where Nancy was, but why the people sworn to find her were fighting each other as much as the predator. By early March 2026, the investigation into Nancy Guthrie's abduction had become as much about a clash of egos as it was about finding a missing woman. While the FBI's expert profilers worked in a secondary capacity, a startling secret began to emerge from the past of Sheriff Chris Nanos. It was revealed by former Chief Deputy Richard Castigar that Nanos allegedly held a decade-long grudge against the FBI stemming from a 2015 public corruption probe into the Pima County Sheriff's Department. This deep-seated distrust reportedly manifested as a blue wall that blocked federal agents from key evidence. The FBI was not only denied immediate access to the raw doorbell camera footage, but was also sidelined while Nanos spent roughly $200,000 in taxpayer money to send DNA to a private Florida lab, an expense that critics called political gatekeeping.
Sheriff Chris Nano says that he is confident the Nancy Guthrie case will be solved. This comes 1 month after Guthrie was last seen.
12 News journalist Jade Cunningham has more on what he says about this investigation. And there were some other developments as well, Jade, today.
People hoping this case will have a resolution, including the Guthrie family and Sheriff Nano saying he is confident that that again would happen. Now,
the most shocking revelation came when it was discovered that the FBI had been tracking the suspect through Walmart sales records linked to the Ozark Trail backpack. But they were allegedly forced to wait for local warrants that the sheriff's department delayed for days. The blueprint of silence was finally shattered when the FBI, frustrated by the lack of progress, moved their command center from Tucson to Phoenix. This was a silent, tactical retreat that signaled a vote of no confidence in the local handling of the case. Simultaneously, a whistleblower from within the sheriff's department exposed that Nanos had reportedly dismissed proof of life clues that the FBI considered high priority. As Savannah Guthrie and her family returned to the Tucson home to place flowers at a makeshift memorial, the narrative shifted. The inside job wasn't just about who took Nancy, but about how a personal grudge between two law enforcement agencies may have ruined the best chance of bringing her home alive. As of this week, the investigation into the abduction of Nancy Guthrie has officially reached a somber 1-month milestone. The red and blue strobes that once filled her driveway in the Catalina foothills have gone dark. On February 26, the FBI made the tactical decision to relocate its primary command center from Tucson to Phoenix, and the Guthrie home, once the most analyzed square footage in America, has been released back to the family. The shocking secret of the case remains the unresolved friction that defined its first 30 days. Despite the Pima County Sheriff's Department spending over $200,000 on private DNA testing in Florida, the results have been maddeningly inconclusive. The mixed DNA profile from the porch and the discarded glove has failed to produce a suspect, leaving federal agents to wonder if the outcome would have been different had the evidence been sent to the FBI's Quantico lab on day 1. On Monday, March 2, Savannah Guthrie returned to the home for the first time since her mother vanished. Accompanied by her siblings, Annie and Tommaso, she walked down the driveway to a makeshift memorial that has become a local landmark. The family placed yellow flowers, Nancy's favorite, beside a sign that reads, "Let Nancy come home." In a heartbreaking social media post, Savannah acknowledged the grim reality of the timeline. "Mama, we miss you so much. Our hearts are broken. We are standing on ash. But our love burns bright." The $1 million reward remains active, a final effort to break the blueprint of silence that has protected the kidnapper. While the physical search in the Arizona desert has scaled back, the FBI continues to monitor the digital shadows for any sign of the Bitcoin wallet or the inside man, who knew exactly when to strike. The Nancy Guthrie case is no longer just a hunt for a perpetrator. It is a search for accountability in a system that many believe failed a family when they needed it most. The desert has kept its secrets for a month, but as any investigator knows, the truth has a way of rising with the heat.